Welcome to today's presentation on technical Agile secrets for non-technical people. My name is Marcy Lentz, and on behalf of ProTech Training, I will serve as your host today. But before I introduce you to our guests, just a few housekeeping items. This presentation will last approximately 45 minutes with additional time at the end for Q&A. During the webinar, feel free to enter any of your questions into the Q&A section of Teams. Today's presentation is being recorded, and in the coming days, you will receive an email with a recording link. Now, a little bit about our guests. Matt Lassiter is the founder of Engaged Agility. He is an Agile coach, trainer, and mentor with specific interests in business and organizational agility. He has been building high-performing teams for 20 plus years. He has customized multiple methodologies, including a methodology for teams that will eventually adopted throughout the entire line of business. He has coached new teams, seasoned executives, and everyone in between. Our other guest is Kyle Griffin. He has 30 years of experience as a programmer, process improvement specialist, and a teacher. His extensive knowledge of programming includes C, C++, Android, Java, Groovy, and Python. He has been teaching and implementing XP programming practices since before the Agile Manifesto was written. In the last 15 years, he has worked variously as a lead programmer, Agile coach, and trainer/mentor. For fun away from work, Kyle writes Android education software and treatises on the theoretical foundations of Agile methodologies. Without further ado, I give you Matt and Kyle.
Matt, I think you're up.
Thanks, Marcy. Today, we're going to be talking about one of our classes called Technical Agile Secrets for Non-Technical People. And this is a class that Kyle has worked on in the past, and I found some great value in it as one of the non-technical people. And it's great because it helps us understand a little bit about why using the technical Agile practices is important and how we can help make those practices happen. First, I want to tell you just a little bit about Engaged Agility and what we do. If you click to the next slide. Thank you. So we're going to talk a little bit about Engaged Agility, and then we'll jump into the rest of the presentation around what is agility, what are the components of technical agility, and what you can expect in the class should you decide to take it. And of course, like Marcy said, we'll have some questions and answers at the end. So, Engaged Agility. I founded Engaged Agility in 2020. And Kyle, if you'll go ahead and click on the next slide. I founded Engaged Agility in 2020, and it was kind of weird because COVID hit about 3 weeks after. But something that I had noticed is that a lot of people were taking classes, and the feedback that I would hear on any class, not classes that I was teaching, but from other classes, they're like, gosh, that class was really boring. And all the instructor did was read from the slides. And so it was kind of the impetus for the name Engaged Agility and how we teach our classes. And this is some of our philosophy here, but we really enjoy being fully committed to our clients and working with the clients to mentor them and help them become self-sufficient in all the things that they do, whether that's through training or consulting, either one. We're really out there trying to help our clients become self-sufficient so that they don't need us around forever and ever. We want them to be able to do all the fun stuff on their own. These are some of the services. We do training and consulting, both all the time, anytime. And we also have some mentoring programs where we'll actually help people set up communities of practice, help them learn and understand their role at a deeper level, kind of a phone a friend, one-on-one type conversation. So any of your Agile needs, we can help with that. And we do a lot of work for ProTech and some of their clients as well. So you can reach out to them to get in touch with us. I want to talk about one class that's new, and the only reason I'm talking about this is because it's so new to make sure everybody's aware of it. There's a new class out there called the Advanced SPC Certification Path. If any of you guys are safe practice consultants then this new class takes things beyond the original SPC class. It looks at things like LPM a little bit deeper. It looks at how do you engage with leaders. It looks at relentless improvement and takes a deeper dive into how that happens. And then there is a facilitated learning session at the end. We've run 2 of these classes in the last 2 months, and the feedback has been amazing. It's a lot of fun and super insightful. It lets us get into a lot more stories and conversations from quote unquote the real world. So join us in one of these classes if you're an SPC and take your education just a little bit further. All right. So Kyle's going to take it from here and tell us a little bit about technical agility, why it's important, how we should think about it, and why we, as the non-technical people in the world, can help make it a reality. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Kyle.
Thanks, Matt. For what it's worth, Matt is going to interrupt me anytime he sees something that we need to interrupt me on, or maybe Marcy. And I can't see any of y'all right now. I am looking at my presentation screen. I don't have a bunch of screens set up. So if you need something, you got to make a lot of noise at Matt or something. Let's go ahead and roll forward. Looks to me like I've got a long 30 minutes to chat about this course, and then we'll finish up and have room for questions. Okay, so what's this course about? Essentially, there's what's on the slide, and then there's the stories that I can tell. Once upon a time, in roughly the year 2000, 1999, 2000, here I am hanging out in a Borders bookstore back when they had bookstores. And I'm hanging out in a Borders bookstore, and I'm going through my software section of the bookstore, and that's like one large shelf of books about MeHi and several and like 6 feet wide. And I'm going through the books and I'm going, okay, I've been helping people build software for a while now, but it's really hard to get people to build software better. I can build software okay. I can teach them to build software, but building software well is a really hard problem. I get these new hires who have graduated from college and they don't build software well. And I get people who have been in industry for a few years, and some of them do, but most of them just build software that kind of works. And I'm at a loss. I've tried all sorts of things. I've gone through everything the industry seems to have to offer. I've done the object-oriented thing. The object-oriented thing shifted to the patterns thing, right? There's careful design and good architecture and good requirements, and seems to be beat to death. How the heck do you build good software? And then here I am in this bookstore, and I pull out this little skinny kind of beige book that's not very fancy illustration. It's called Extreme Programming Explained. And I read really fast, so I flipped through pretty much the whole book in the next hour in the bookstore. And all of a sudden, it's like, wait a minute, this could solve a lot of our programming problems. And so in 2000-ish, I became a convert to extreme programming. It's just better than anything else I had seen before, and pretty much since. And then in 2001, like 9 of these guys who were pro XP got together with 8 other people doing software methodology and said, hey, let's have a common term to share. And so we rebranded. We weren't just XP anymore. We liked the term Agile. Cool. And then in like 2005, the Scrum heated up. And so most of the people who had been talking about XP for the last 5 years, the Scrum terms turned into the ones that were talked about. And then, I don't know, 2012, 13, 14, more of it was safe. And it has been Scrum and safe for most of, well, the last 25 years. But what about the original stuff? What about the stuff that kicked it off? What about the stuff that I still think is as or more important than the stuff you see in Scrum and Safe? Where's the dollar value, and why aren't we talking about it? Can't answer why aren't we talking about it. It's because the XP people are opposed to certifications, probably. And so there's no badge we can get, and it's a technical thing. So a lot of the folks who have been interested in Agile have been interested on the process side. So we can't really even get to the technical parts of it. But there's a lot of value there. And it's seemed to me for most of the last 25 years that a lot of people have missed that value, and it would be useful to them to know about it. So I'm going to do this really quick. Some of this is review for everybody, and we'll move forward from there. What's agility? Well, the standard historical definition of agility was the ability to change directions quickly, effectively. And Josh Kuryevsky of Modern Agile has pointed out pretty loudly that the word gracefully was always part of the definition of agility once upon a time, and that it's important. So whereas I for a while just saying quickly and effectively, the gracefully matters. You'd not only want to change directions quickly and effectively, but you don't want to trip while you're doing so. Okay, that's agility. That's lovely. We're not just here to talk about dancers or football players who jump over other guys while running backwards, right? What's business agility? What's software agility? Well, I've been running with this definition for, I don't know, 15, 18 years. And my line has been agility. It's really quick. How fast is your feedback system? What is the amount of time that elapses between when new information gets created and when the system gets changed based on that new information, right? You put out a new product, a new tool. You find out, or rather, you put out a new tool, right? The software now has a new feature. The feature turns out to be a little bit tricky for customers to use. Turns out that the way you did your user experience testing up front didn't uncover that. That information only came up when you released it to the public, right? And now users are trying to use that tool and they're having trouble. How long does it take between users having trouble using the tool and us updating the tool so that the users no longer have trouble? The new information is created when the users touch the new product. When we change it is pretty much, it's at least the best definition of agility I've got for a business context. If somebody else has a better one, cool. I would love to listen, but that's the one I've been operating on for, I don't know, 15 to 20 years. So the next piece, and this is the biggest insight that I saw and I may sound old at the moment. This is the biggest insight that I saw come out of software in the 80s. The biggest insight is I mostly stopped writing new code a long, long time ago. Maybe 10% of my total work is building something new, right? Maybe I'm working on an accounting system and the federal government releases some new rules. Maybe, I don't know, what was it, 2 years ago that they released rules about how you amortize, how you depreciate software developer time. And so they release new rules, and I have to include those new rules information into my existing system. Or maybe I have to make it so my existing system looks a little different, even though it functions the same way. Or maybe I have to also accept data that comes in from some other new system that we have included. But 90% of the work that I'm dealing with is there is a system and I need to go into the system and change the system that's there. I'm not going to write a new system. I'm going to edit a system. I'm going to change a system. And so according to me, the entire point of the object-oriented paradigm is a shift in how you think about software. It shifts you from thinking about how do I build it today to, I'm going to have to change this tomorrow. How do I build it so that the total cost of this software between building it today and changing it tomorrow stays low, rather than how do I build the software so that it works today cheaply, right? It's a shift from build to build and maintain to, well, almost all of what I do is maintain. The whole how much it costs to build, that's really just a rounding error in the total cost of ownership. It's like 5 or 10% of what the real total cost of the system is. How I build it has far more of an impact on how much it costs to change the code than it does on how much it costs to build the code. So, I mean, that's a big deal difference. And a lot of folks maybe don't think about that as much. Okay, cool. So we are saying we have to change systems, not mostly write new ones. And so I have an acronym that I use. Other people have other words that they use, but my acronym's cute, so I use it. What's one skip? One, what is the total time? What is the total cost of one small, correct change getting into production on average, right? Almost everybody I know who spent any real amount of time around technical agility comes up with some variety of this question. And we all have fancy names for it. And to some extent, the Dora metrics that you may have heard about that come from Gene Kim and Humble and company, those are effectively asking the same question. How much does it take to make a small change? One of my friends, Joel, he walks into new companies and says, okay, cool, here's what we're going to do. I want to follow our normal process. No speed ups, no shifts, no rapid. I want to follow our normal process. How long does it take, both with process rules, with testing, with technical checks, to add a hello world page onto our site? Let's start a timer and let's measure how many human hours are involved. Let's measure how many calendar hours are involved. Let's measure how many dollars are involved in putting a page that says hello world onto the system we're working in. It's a small, correct change. I usually like to, if we can do that, interact with the database as well so that we can see a bigger, small, correct change, but still, what does it take to get a small, correct change into production? If you take into account, we're looking at the speed of the feedback system, and you take into account that this is about changes to existing systems, this is a pretty good measure of your agility. What's it take to get a small, correct change into production, right? Means you've checked it enough. It's not breaking stuff. It's not breaking the old stuff, and it wants to go in. Cool. Okay. So here's the question. What contributes to the speed at which we can change things? Well, it turns out there's a lot of things that contribute. The technical practices that we're following, the technical approach that we're taking can change things a lot. If you have a very complex system, it can take a lot of time to make even little changes. I'll go into that a little more later, but once upon a time, I was hanging out at a large insurance company. That's not telling you very much because I've worked at a lot of large insurance companies. I was hanging out at a large insurance company, and they said, "Hey, Kyle, we want to make a change." And I said, "Oh, okay. Well, let's estimate the change." And so I looked at the problem from a theoretical point of view and said, "Oh, well, here's what I think it should take to make the change." And I said, "Well, I could probably do the change by myself in a week, but I want to double that and call it 2 weeks because we want testing and confirmation and all of that. So let's call it 2 weeks and 2 people to do the change." And I said, "Hey, what did you get? What's your, the systems that you've got. How long do you think it's going to take to make this change?" And they said, well, we're not done yet. 2 weeks later, they had spent enough energy to do the estimate, right? Probably 5 hours of work to go through and figure out enough things to do the estimate. And what they told me was it will take a team of 5 people 13 weeks to get this change made. The difference between my estimation of 1 person in 2 weeks, or 2 people in 2 weeks, 160 hours maybe, versus their estimate of a team of 5 for a quarter. 40 times 13 is 500, times 5 is 2,500 person hours versus 160 person hours. That difference is a factor of like 15. Is a difference between a system that is relatively well built for change and a system that has grown without paying attention to change over the course of a decade or 2 or 3. That sounds bad, right? But I was going, maybe I'm stupid. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't know how much it should cost to change. So I went out and talked to some of my buddies out in Silly Valley. And I said, hey, here's a change we're making on a system that does this. And my buddy goes, well, it's funny. I just made a change to our system that does that. And I made roughly that change. I said, well, that makes my estimation question easier. How long did it take? He said, it took me an hour by myself. After a bit of interrogation, it turns out, yeah, it was basically a system that solved the same problem. It was a system, and he did it an hour by himself. So what we've got now is not I did the work, that I should do the work and it'd take 160 hours versus the 2,500 estimated hours, but rather it took him literally an hour versus the 2,500 hours that my insurance company was going to take to solve the same problem. That's a big difference. What's the difference? Again, the difference is how you built the tech to optimize for skips, fast, small correct changes getting into production. Tech matters here, right? You can get huge shifts in how long something takes. Is tech the only thing? No. How people work together. If you go look at any given process that you can find, whether you're looking at this from a Scrum point of view or a SAFe point of view, the handoffs where group 1 stops working on it and group 2 starts working on it, that's the slowest part of every process I've ever seen, right? How the people work together effectively is a huge chunk of this, despite any chunk of tech that we're working with. Honestly, the tech may have only been 100 or 200 times faster, but the fact that the guy was able to do all of the steps without handing it off to somebody else to do the next step, that was a really big part of this too. The process of getting approvals, how we go about doing things, that matters. I've seen processes, Scrum was built to be a process that runs quickly as compared to older, slower, phase-gated processes. How you interact with the customer, how you interact with the product. When do you get your feedback from the customer on whether that's what they actually wanted? How good is that cycle? Makes a difference as to the speed at which we change things. That's not just the speed from product owner having finished writing a story, but it's the speed from when the customer becomes dissatisfied to actually being able to use something new. I like to call it please to thank you times sometimes. And then, of course, how your organization works together with the software group also impacts how fast things go. All of these layers matter to the speed. And, well, very simply, a lot of us only talk about green and purple, the process side and the enterprise side. Let's talk about the circles. First circle, the one I'm focused on, is the technical side. terms that appear here: test-driven development, refactoring, simple design, and pairing. Those are all terms that I stole out of the original XP book that I read back 25 years ago. The technical side of this circle, people will use the words extreme programming, they'll use the word DevOps, they'll use the word craftsmanship. I used all XP words here, but the DevOps words, the craftsmanship words, they use very similar words. There are some extra ones. That's part of how we do things quickly. The team level questions: how do the people doing the work together effectively? Well, there's discussions of that in extreme programming. There's discussions of how we work together in DevOps, right? The Phoenix project is a fabulous discussion of how working together often fails. Craftsmanship takes stuff from XP and DevOps and runs with it. It's even in the manifesto how we discuss how we as human beings work together, right? Words XP uses are continuous integration and collective ownership, sustainable pace, system metaphor, which almost nobody understands. Words that come out of how do the human beings doing the work together? I might even say pairing might be part of this. Then you get to the process layer. The process layer is how Scrum and XP, Scrum has some words to say about this. XP has some words to say about this. The manifesto has a bunch of words to say about this. XP uses words like small releases. Scrum uses words like daily Scrum. XP uses words like we have a planning game. Scrum uses words like we have backlog refinement, or we have sprint planning. Right? We have a bunch of process steps that go on. One of my favorite areas that Agile has improved in the last 15 years is what I would call product agility. If you look at this over the last 25 years, one of the major areas of growth, one of the areas you see some of the forward-thinking folks in Agile putting more of their energy in these days is into what you might call product agility. We're incorporating a lot of the insights of user experience. Even extreme programming has a couple things to say, like put a customer on your team so you can talk to somebody who actually uses the product. We use words like design thinking and journey mapping and customer interviews and user feedback and usability testing. Essentially, a whole bunch of words having to do with how frequently our Agile teams have fairly direct contact with the customer themselves, rather than somebody on a different side, like a product manager or a manager with lots of opinions that Agile people like to make jokes about hippos with. And then, again, for speed, there's the enterprise side. There's safe and less, and we do PI planning, and we do Scrum of Scrums, we do lean portfolio management, and we do value streams, and all of those things, right? All of these pieces, all 5 circles, contribute to our agility. And yet, 90% of the discussion in the industry is the green circle and the purple circle. 50% of the discussion on LinkedIn maybe comes out in the dark blue circle, the team layer. But we're really, really light on the red parts. So let's talk about red. What makes software easy to change? A couple things. If the discovering errors is cheap, easy, fast, and safe. If the process to go from I finished building this to the customer is using this is cheap, easy, fast, and safe. If changing the code is cheap, easy, fast, and safe. And if recovering from the problems that I find is cheap, easy, fast, and safe. If all of those are true, then it's probably technically easy to change. But if I don't find out when the problems happen easily, quickly, then it's not quite as good. Similarly with the other pieces. So what can I do to make software changes cheap, easy, fast, and safe? Well, the best answer I have ever seen, I've seen it several times in several cases, and that best answer has been you get one really smart programmer, you have them do the work, and they have experience. They know the system, and they have a lot of skill on building changeable software. When I find one guy who builds the software and they know everything about the software, it's really easy. Your code is cheap, easy, fast, and safe to change. So long as that guy stays and he doesn't leave and he doesn't get tired of doing stuff and he doesn't change careers, and it's all great. One guy keeps all the stuff in his head, stays for 30, 40 years, fabulous choice. You say, I need a change. He goes in, he changes it. 10 minutes later, you've got a new fixed system. Choice number two, you have a team of those guys. You repair the somebody can quit or retire problem, but in exchange, you lose a little bit from they have to talk to each other, and Bob knows this part of the system and Annie knows that part of the system. It's almost as good, but not quite for speed. And honestly, the only other solution I've ever seen to make software changes cheap, easy, fast, and safe is to do technical agile practices. I'm not claiming that my technical agile practices are better than one superstar or a team of superstars. I'm claiming that if you don't have a team of superstars, if you have a team that's composed of some seniors, some juniors, you're switching back and forth, people shift what project they're working on, technical agile practices tend to be the best answer. So really quick, I'm just going to go through this quickly. What happens if you start going through and you finish up a Sudoku, you're playing Sudoku, and you find out that one of your numbers is wrong? In this picture, one of the numbers being wrong is pretty easy, right? And without giving it away, you change one of those fives to something else and the whole system works. In a lot of cases, you do a Sudoku. I mean, I don't know about the rest of you, but I've spent a lot of time sitting on airplanes and they have Sudoku in the airplane magazines. So I pick up the airplane magazine, I do the Sudoku. Sometimes I'm smart and I do it in pencil. And I get to the end and I find out that there's no solution in the last square, that I've made a mistake. How much of the Sudoku do I have to undo in order to make my system work? Well, in a lot of cases, I have to undo like 20 or 30 squares of things that got filled in because I made a mistake. one of the things non-technical people don't pay attention to as much is programming is a lot like Sudoku. If you make a mistake, you can paint yourself into a corner in a way that making a change requires undoing 10 or 20 or 50 other things that you have already done. And an awful lot of software problems come down to that thing. Well, okay, cool. So tech agile matters, that making changes can be hard. You may have to unwind a bunch of stuff. Does anybody know about this thing, or is this just something weird that Kyle is saying? Well, actually, there's a lot of people who know this, right? Jeff Sutherland, the guy who is most responsible for building Scrum, said, few implementations of Scrum achieve the hyper-productive state for which Scrum was designed. Those that do all implement variations on extreme programming, which is to say the technical practices. SAFe, in its training materials online, says the quality of the work products that drive business value directly determines how quickly teams can deliver their solutions. The technical quality, the technical practices matter and pretty much drive how agile you're going to be. Less. Craig Larman. Organizational agility is constrained by technical agility. You're not going to actually be agile in your process stuff if you don't fix the technical stuff too. So, like, this isn't news. Everybody says the leaders of the approaches all say these things. So what do you do? Well, here's a question. Why do you need to know? Because the fact that Dean Leffingwell knows this, and Craig Larman knows this, and Sutherland knows this. The people who founded the methods know that you're not going to get very much agility if you don't do the technical parts. But the fact that the leaders, the founders of the processes know that doesn't mean that everybody knows that. Because all of these things are intertwined. It turns out that doing the process pieces changes what works for technical practices. Doing a 2-week sprint means that the traditional approaches that we used for design and testing don't work anymore, right? You need different practices to do 2-week sprints well than you need to do quarterly releases well. And because, as the change management author Cotter says, only leadership can change the system. If I am a developer and I know that we need the technical practices to be done, I can't make that change. I need leadership in the room. I need people advocating to leadership that we can make these changes. When I talk tech agile, my line is, what do you want? Do you want faster today and slower tomorrow? Or do you want faster tomorrow and slower today? Since I'm always thinking in terms of cost of change, I reliably choose green. And I think most people say, I'm talking about faster today. Why are we talking about tomorrow? And most people aren't taking seriously the trade-off. I'm like 3 minutes late on getting through the stuff, so I'm going to go a couple 3 minutes over before we get to questions. What can we expect in the class that we get to? We're basically going to talk about Agile. We're going to talk about the technical parts of agility, and there's 4 major parts of technical agility that we need to pay attention to. We need code agility. We need to do how we are doing testing with agility. We need to do deployment with agility, and we need to do monitoring with agility, automated monitoring specifically. There's a bunch of words we're going to use. I'm going to go through and discuss and show every one of these in our presentation in the class, but we're going to go through these pieces. Now, a word from our sponsors.
So one thing that I had the pleasure of having is before this was ever really a class, I learned all of the information through people like Kyle.
Mhm.
And actually, Kyle, if you'll go to the previous slide there for a second, I got to learn about pairing and TDD and test automation and fast failure within about an hour, and it was such a wonderful exercise. All that happened was I said, "Hey, tell me about this TDD thing. Why is it important? Like, help me understand." And the guy that I was working with, he said, "Let's just do it." So we sat down and he said, "Do you know how to code Java?" And I said, "Absolutely not. I wrote some code back in college, but not much, and I'm certainly not any good at it." And he said, "That's okay. Let's start here." And so he was pairing with me, and we pulled up Java, and we pulled up JUnit to write some unit tests. And I was telling him the thought pattern of the code that we needed to create, and we were creating a Roman numeral calculator. So when I put in the number 1, it would return an I, and if I put in the number 4, it would return IV. We started with nothing and just started writing it, and my code became very, very quickly a super long list of nested if statements. It was all correct because we used TDD and we used test automation so that I could check every answer that was going through. But my code was absolutely terrible. It was probably the messiest code written by man in the last 20 or 30 years. But he was trying to get me to understand the real way to write this code. And he was talking about arrays and this stuff that I was like, I just don't know. And he said, "That's okay. Go out to Google." So I Googled Roman numeral calculator in Java, and it had like 6 lines of code or something, where mine was 100 lines of code. And I took those 6 lines of code and I copied and pasted them into my code. And he said, "How confident are you if we had to release this to production? If we had users that wanted to use this Roman numeral calculator, how confident are you that we're still correct?" I said, "I don't know. Let me go run all of my tests that I've written," because I'd been doing TDD and test automation. And I ran all of those tests, and the answers were all exactly the same as what I had gotten before. All of my tests were green. TDD talks about red, green refactor, and all of my tests were green at this point. And I was like, "Hey, it looks like this refactor worked because everything's green." And he said, "Great, we can ship it to production." And like, just light bulbs went on. I was like, "This is amazing. Why don't we do this everywhere? Why this is actually absolutely awesome." And that's when, and I was a scrum master at the time. That's when I learned that these technical practices can actually make our world better. I didn't have to do a whole lot of manual testing, which was a huge bottleneck in our system. I didn't have to have 46 different testers running all of the regression tests. It was really easy for me to get a good bit of them done just with the automation that I'd had. So it was a magical moment for me. And that's part of what we're trying to do in this class, is recreate that magical moment so that everyone can understand the importance of this technical agility and the technical agile practices, and take them back to their organization and be a champion for them, because we're the ones that can help make that change happen. Just like we talked about on the last slide with Cotter, that only leadership can change the system. It takes leadership to push some of this stuff through.
Thanks. Matt is maybe my favorite advocate for, hey, I'm a scrum master. I don't do the technical stuff, but I've seen how important it is. 2 or 3 words on this. Manual stuff that you do is bad for cycle time. I'm not going to say anything else there, but we're going to talk about it in our class. Handoffs, where team 1 hands the ball to team 2, is bad for cycle time. We're going to talk about how to deal with that too.
And Kyle, when you say cycle time, it's skip time. Like,
it's
handoffs.
Skip time different.
Yeah, it we don't want to be slow in the things that help improve our skip time, and handoffs are bad. It's just a general saying that I say to all my clients. Handoffs are bad, and they're like, "Okay, got it." And then they start to experience it, but it's the handoffs, even at this person to person layer, when we're handing off little bits of code, or, "Hey, can you make the database change for me?" and letting somebody else do that. It causes things to move slower, and our skip time gets longer. That's bad.
And it gets longer by a lot, right? It's not, oh, it's a longer by a little bit. It's longer by the, oh, it would take me an hour to do all of these things by myself, but because of handoffs, it's going to take 2 weeks.
Okay.
Right? It's really bad for cycle time, for skip time, for lead time.
All right, we've got just under 10 minutes left, and it's time for Q&A. Marcy, did you
Awesome, guys. Well, thank
get a
you.
couple of requests?
I do. What's something I could do today to help move my organization in this direction?
Okay, so I'm going to shift so maybe I can see better. What can we do to move the organization in this direction? So my number one thing that I do is, well, I have two things that I do here. One of them is I start doing two things. I start talking about cheap, easy, fast, and safe for changes. And two, I start talking about measurement. As somebody who is on the non-technical side of Agile, it is very, very easy for me. I've been a Scrum Master before. I've been an Agile coach. It's very easy for me to get folks to take numbers seriously and say, hey, you know what I'd like to measure? I'd like to measure the time from which we get a customer request to the time when we release. And that number is important. Let's measure that.
I really like the example you gave of hello world. Just put that into production. Pretend like somebody just requested it today. Get the funding for it. Get everybody to agree what it's going to look like. Talk to the teams. Get the estimates. Get it approved. Write the code. Run it through whatever your regression test model is. Put it out there. How long are we talking? It's a great place to start. And even if you don't really do it, I think people will get the idea that that should take under a day, and it probably takes at least a week, if not multi-week.
Yeah. What do you have to do? Just get some numbers. Get numbers to show, hey, if our graphics person comes to us and says, you put this in and I don't like the shade of blue you used. Can we fix that? It's hard on the eyes. How long does it take to get the new shade of blue to be used by a customer? Just the whole stretch, if you go through your normal processes rather than doing something expedited. How long does it take? That single piece of information is probably the best thing you can do. I talk about cheap, easy, fast, safe changes, and I get numbers to say, here's how
not cheap, not easy, not fast, and not safe they are.
They are right now for us. Yeah.
Marcy, I see one out there in chat, so I'll ask it. Season's asking, what technical ability or prerequisites should we have for the class?
You should be able to spell code, right? But this class is intended specifically for non-technical folks. I expect that everybody here is working in a field near technology, and so you have seen people who have new node who have written code that says print hello world, right? You've seen code that looks something like that. If that makes sense to you, you've seen that much code, we're good. That's enough. If it's less than that, then we want to probably talk about the notion of algorithm. But like, if this makes sense, you're technical enough. If that doesn't make sense, we want to talk before going in, because you're probably still technical enough, but I don't want to be unfair.
I can tell you that while I was maybe a little bit more ahead in the technical world, you can start with very, very, very little technical knowledge, because that's what the developers for. When we communicate with developers, they will come back with the smart technical stuff and tell us, we should do that this way. And it's this way, it's that way in class. It's like, well, I need one that, if we were doing the example I said earlier about the Roman numeral calculator, I could say, well, what I want to do is if I put in a number 1, it should return an I. And the developer can write the code to make that happen. And then I can be like, okay, if I put in the number 2, it should return 2 I's. And then as we get down to 4, it starts to get weird, right? Now I'd be like, okay, if it's a 4, it's an IV. And then the developer can ask questions. And that's what Kyle would do. Be like, tell me about how that works. And, he can turn that into the super smart algorithm stuff that, again, I don't want to pretend to be able to think deep enough for that. But in the class, Kyle or whoever the instructor is can help convert our words into the code. And then he'll be like, all right, we're going to write some code, but we have to write our test first. And he'll go over and he'll show, how do I know? How would I test this? I'll be like, well, heck, if I put in this number, this letter comes back. Oh, okay, yeah. And he writes the code for that for us. And then he will show us how that, I mentioned red-green refactor. He'll show us how the red-green refactor is happening in the code. And you will see the red dot, you will see the green dot, and then he will tell you, now we have to refactor this. It is just literally us talking through the process that goes in our head and letting him do all the fancy technical stuff.
Yeah. I've been teaching these TDD things for honestly 25 years, and you can do it 70% as well with people who don't know any tech at all. I like to say, knowing that there's such a thing as variables that you might have covered in algebra some years ago is probably helpful. But I don't know that you need to be more technical than that.
Marcy, I think we've got time for one more if you have some on your
All right.
side.
Tell me more about the class that this is an intro for.
Yeah. So again, that's here. We went through this pretty lightly. This is my very, very short list of what words that technical Agile people use in order to say, hey, here are things we can do. Each one of these is a technique or a set of techniques in the case of test automation at layers. And doing these things makes a difference to the agility, the ability for you as somebody working with agility to make agility happen in your organization. And having a familiarity with what it really means as opposed to, oh, I know this word, is a really big deal. You can now advocate for it. You can now help get people moving in the direction. You can encourage developers who might otherwise be skeptical to try some of these things. Trying is a lot easier than getting folks to do them, but getting somebody to try it for a bit is generally helpful. And so we'll go through these things. We'll see what they actually mean. We'll talk about them. We'll talk about the value proposition for them, and we'll see the actuality of what it means to do this, as opposed to just, oh, there's a word TDD, which like half of the people using the word don't actually mean TDD by it.
So I want to say something about it too. And I picked up a book off my shelf. It's called The Power of Moments. If you guys haven't read it, it's a wonderful book. It has nothing to do with development, but what it does talk about is creating moments that create a shift in the way people think or the way people interact. And that's what happened for me back in, I don't know, somewhere around 2012, 2013, when I sat down and the guy was like, I'm going to show you how to do TDD. I'm going to show you the importance of automated tests, and we're going to learn what this red green refactor really means. And I was like, this is all Greek to me. So yes, please show me. It created such an impact. It gave me such a deeper understanding that I can go and have those conversations. And the conversation is not just, hey, we should do TDD. The conversation is I have seen the power of TDD. I've seen it take something where I can literally erase all of the code and put in new code and be comfortable releasing the new code because I did all of the steps of TDD. And we don't have that in our system today. I've talked to our developers and they're like, we never have time to do that. People won't let us take the time to write the automated unit tests because we have to get to the next feature, the next feature, the next feature. It's back on that scale. They're saying everybody here is telling us we need to be worried about fast today, and they ignore the fact that we're going to be slow tomorrow. We've got to shift it. I hear it from my developers. Now I need to help change their environment. And how can I do that? I can get a little bit better understanding of what they mean so that I can go in and have better conversations on how we can help change that environment. We want to create those moments and those stories for the people that can have those moments and those stories.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. If you guys want to go ahead and put up that last slide for me, that would be great. So if you guys liked what you heard today and are interested in signing up for any of Kyle and Matt's classes, we actually at ProTech, we have, I just got a couple examples of their classes here. You can reach out at info@ProTech Training or just give us a call, and we can set you up with your account manager and get you guys signed up for any of Kyle and Matt's classes. The one that they're talking about right here that we were intro to is next running on April 8th through the 9th. We've got, the more in-depth class of what you guys heard today. And it's a 2-day class. And if you guys are interested, just reach out to ProTech and we'll get you guys signed up. I want to thank you, Kyle and Matt, for doing this today. And I want to thank everybody for giving, us an hour of your time so we can go ahead and showcase what Kyle and Matt have.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Have
you,
a great
Marcy,
day.
for setting this up.
Perfect. Thank you, Kyle. You guys have a great day.
You too. Be well.